Good morning. Welcome to this morning's webinar on biodiesel. Before I turn the webinar over to David and John, I have a few housekeeping announcements. First, everyone's lines are muted. Please submit your questions via the chat section, and we'll answer them at the end of the presentation. Also, today's presentation is being recorded and will be posted on NATSO's website. Now, it's my pleasure to turn the presentation over to NATSO's David Fialkov.
Thank you, Amy, and thank all of you for joining today. I think you'll find this pretty informative and helpful. And the reason for that is that in my kind of role as the government affairs advocate here at NATSO, not only do I kind of work with members of Congress and policymakers, but I also talk to a lot of our members about what issues they're confronting out in the real world, because that kind of helps me talk to policymakers, obviously. And oftentimes I get phone calls where people are asking me why their competitors, even across the street or right next door, are able to undercut them on price, whether it be 1 or 2 cents or even more. And they don't understand, given the market that they're dealing with, how their competitors are able to remain viable. And upon further discussion, more often than not, it turns out that their competitors are incorporating biodiesel into their economics in one form or another. And it tends to, you know, light up a light bulb above the head of NATSO members who can begin to think about how to incorporate biodiesel into their own model. And the reason that it can be so helpful is that it does enable you to, if done properly, both charge less money for fuel and obtain a higher margin. So we're going to hear from some folks at REG today about how they can potentially work with you to make that happen. And before I turn it over to them, I'll give you just a brief overview of kind of the federal policy regime that governs biodiesel and kind of facilitates the positive economics that I just described. Putting aside the fact that there's a $1 a gallon tax credit for any blender of biodiesel, which is an important program, but not really the real key to it. The real key is a program called the Renewable Fuel Standard, or the RFS, which a lot of you have probably heard of. But simply put, it obligates every fuel refiner and importer to basically generate a certain volume of renewable fuel every year. And these parties have to attain a particular number of renewable fuel credits, which are known as RINs, or Renewable Identification Numbers. And they use these RINs to show that they are in compliance with the RFS program, to show that they have introduced a certain minimum of renewable fuel into the fuel supply every year. And RINs are essentially an artificial commodity that can kind of be bought and sold in an open market. And many obligated parties, many refiners, are unable to directly generate their mandatory volume of renewable fuel. And in these instances, they rely on others to introduce renewable fuel into the supply chain for them. And that's kind of where the more savvy fuel marketer and fuel retailer can step in. For truck stop operators, the predominant renewable fuel that they can sell to take advantage of the RFS is biodiesel and renewable diesel. And essentially, biodiesel producers generate a biodiesel RIN for every gallon of biodiesel that they produce. And as with any commodity, these RINs can kind of take on a value of their own, generally reflecting the economics of blending biodiesel into diesel fuel. And biodiesel producers, such as REG, can in turn sell biodiesel to biodiesel blenders, who ultimately will blend it with diesel fuel before it's sold to the motoring public. And the question then becomes, what happens to that RIN? What happens to that commodity? So because every gallon of biodiesel has a valuable RIN that is associated with it, the value of that RIN can create a sufficient value to make biodiesel cheaper than clear diesel fuel, which means that upon blending biodiesel into diesel fuel, the blender can kind of then separate the RIN from the physical gallon of biodiesel and sell those RINs to obligated parties, to refiners that need them in order to meet their RFS mandates. And the money that marketers can generate from these sales enable them to pass savings on to their customers in the form of lower prices at the pump, yet nonetheless they're able to make higher margins on account of the RIN transaction. And alternatively, you know, if a retailer isn't inclined to do the blending themselves or really get involved with RINs that much, they can be savvy enough to recognize the value that is associated with this program, and they can buy pre-blended product from a seller, and although they may not own the RIN that is associated with those blended gallons, the fact that the seller keeps the RIN should enable the retailer to purchase that product at a discount to reflect the value of that RIN. So the value of the RIN should be baked into the price of the product that the retailer buys. So with that kind of brief introduction, I guess brief in quotation marks as always whenever a lawyer talks, I'll turn it over to the folks at REG now to talk about this in a little bit more detail. And then at the end, we'll circle back and have a little bit more of a conversation, and we'll incorporate some questions that you asked throughout.
Great, thanks, David. This is Jon Scharingson in Ames, which is where REG's headquarters is located. I'm the executive director of sales and marketing here at REG. And David, I think that was a great introduction. As you can see, the title of this presentation is Growing Your Business with Biodiesel. It's really focused on the travel center industry. So we've got a great cross-section of participants in the webinar today, I think representing around 25 different states across the country. So I'm really going to focus on the blending economics of biodiesel at the national level, talk about some individual state incentives that make blending economics even more attractive, and we can do a deep dive on a one-on-one basis. Either you can do that with David and NATSO or directly with us here at REG. But using that as my introduction, I'll just jump into it. So as David said, you know, some of the key biodiesel demand drivers is some of the federal legislation. So there is a renewable fuel standard that was put in place in 2007. There's 4 categories of renewable fuels within that standard. Biomass-based diesel is one, and advanced biofuels is another. And actually biodiesel plays in both of those categories. And there are RINs generated in both those categories that are a huge part of the value proposition for biodiesel. So I'll go into that in a bit more detail, actually looking at what economics would look like today if you were buying biodiesel from a supplier such as REG. Another key component of a demand driver are the state incentives that are out there. Most of those are retail incentives for convenience stores and truck stops. I'll walk you through a few examples of those. There are also some states like Minnesota, Oregon, Washington, Pennsylvania that actually have mandated volume requirements of biodiesel blended with number 2 ULSD. That creates a demand base for biodiesel as well. And then a third area, and this is a growing area, started with some, you know, Fortune 100, 200, 500 companies, and it's spreading across the U.S. and the globe, actually. But just a tremendous emphasis on companies being greener, watching their carbon footprint. Obviously, there's news every day about climate change. Companies are worried about this and are taking efforts to improve their carbon footprint, you know, typically under a sustainability component of their organization. So that's creating demand for biodiesel as well. So once again, just a bit more detail in terms of what David described. So the RVO, you know, refers to the required volume obligation that are defined as obligated parties. And obligated parties really at the end of the day, for the most part, are the petroleum majors. It's the Exxons, the BPs, the Shells, the Marathons, the Valeros. You work your way on down the list. They each have an annual requirement, an annual RVO, in terms of the amount of renewable fuel compliance RINs credits that they have to end up with at the end of the year. So the great news for the travel center industry is that, we're not obligated parties. These biodiesel and advanced biofuel RINs have significant value. They're worth about $1.50 per biodiesel gallon today. I'll show some more math on that here in a little bit. But that creates, tremendous economic incentives at your local travel center to incorporate biodiesel into your supply stream to take advantage of some really good economics, maybe share some of that money with your customers to have a more competitive price, which David alluded to. The national travel center chains are really, really good at incorporating biodiesel. They've been doing it for a long time, but there are certainly opportunities for independent owner-operators to take advantage of these opportunities as well. So these are the four categories of renewable fuels that I referred to. So the overall requirement goes to 36 billion gallons of renewable fuels to be utilized by these obligated parties by the year 2022. Each of the categories of fuel increases on an annual basis. So the EPA has set the number for biomass-based diesel, which is traditional biodiesel, for 2017 at 2 billion gallons. So that's about 4% penetration of the 60 billion gallon a year annual distillate market. So in terms of market share penetration, significant opportunities for advancement as we go forward. In addition, biodiesel plays in that advanced biofuel category, as I mentioned, so that creates opportunities in terms of an outlet for RINs. And the other two categories are traditional ethanol and cellulosic fuel as well. I do think it's important to note that it looks like in 2016, the total consumption in the U.S. and Canada is going to be around 2.2, 2.3 billion gallons of biodiesel for the year. Majority of that is obviously North American, U.S. and Canadian production, maybe 400 million gallons of imports. But I'd like to go back just as recently as 2010, which wasn't that long ago. There was only 300 million gallons of biodiesel consumed in the U.S. So we've certainly started to achieve what I would call critical mass in terms of production capacity and just product being much more readily available today than it was a few years ago. So not only has the quality of the product improved immensely, product specifications have improved, the producers are doing a really nice job these days, but there's also been a big investment in infrastructure across the country, and the fuel is much closer, and I'd actually say that it is a mainstream fuel at this point versus being a niche product a few years ago. So let's jump right into what you guys really care about, and that's the economic opportunity to blend biodiesel, at your travel center. So, once again, there's state incentives in the number of states that make biodiesel blending really attractive. There's also in a number of states grant money that's available for infrastructure investments, including investments at your travel centers in terms of dispensers. So recognize that, often there is significant cost, breaking open your concrete, putting in a new biodiesel tank, putting in a new blending system. A number of you have made those type of investments or considered those type of investments for DEF tanks. So we're familiar with a number of folks that have actually put in, when they've been putting in underground DEF tanks, have put in a combined biodiesel DEF tank. So that's something to think about. But there is state money in a number of places to help make those improvements to your facilities. As I mentioned, and I'll show a specific example, RIN values are for, every gallon of biodiesel that's generated, there is a RIN associated with it. So the good news for travel centers is you guys actually have an option. You can buy biodiesel with RINs and then detach it and sell it on to an obligated party. Or if you choose to not want to go through that paperwork and have to, register with the EPA, you can actually buy biodiesel RINless from biodiesel suppliers like REG. So don't get hung up on having to deal with the administrative issues associated with RINs. there are ways to participate in biodiesel and not actually have to take the RINs and still get the economic value associated with it. And then finally, as David alluded to, biodiesel tax credit has been in place every year since 2005. So it has lapsed on 3 different occasions, but it's always been reinstated retroactively to the first of the year from when it lapsed. So we're actually going through a cycle now here at the end of this year, end of 2016, where it's set to expire again on December 31st. We're hopeful that a lame duck session of Congress will extend it prior to the end of the year. We'll see if that happens. If it doesn't, we're very confident, once again, as I mentioned, has happened the previous 3 times, that it will get passed when Congress comes back in 2017, and that would be retroactive to January 1st. But those are some of the key components of the value proposition that change all the time. So I mentioned that, there's lots of states out there with significant incentives, and you can see on this map, it's roughly in 3 or 4 different categories. Some of the states, as I mentioned, like Minnesota, Washington, Oregon, Pennsylvania, have chosen a state mandate. Minnesota has a B10 mandate for about 8 months of the year. It goes back to a B5 mandate in the wintertime. Pennsylvania has a B2 mandate a year-round. So basically, anybody that's marketing diesel fuel in those states is required by law to integrate it with them with every gallon that they sell. Some of the policies that we're really excited about as a company are things that are in places like Iowa and Illinois and Texas and California that are very significant financial incentives. So I looked at the list of participants on this call today. I think there's good reasons for all of you to strongly consider integrating biodiesel in your operations, but certainly if you're in any of those 4 states, there are tremendous financial reasons quickly to consider it. So I'll just briefly describe the state incentive in each of those 4 states, and either NATSO or RIG can provide a lot of additional detail in terms of how they actually work, as well as the paperwork requirements to complete to take advantage of those. Iowa, it's a 2-tiered system. There's a 3.5-cent per gallon retail tax credit, and retail is C-stores and travel centers for every gallon of B5 that they sell. And then there's an additional 5.5 cents per gallon incentive for blends of B11 or higher. So you combine those 2, that's 9 cents a gallon for every gallon of B11, or if you take that back to a B100 equivalent, that's 90 cents a gallon benefit just at the state level. This is before any of the federal RINs values are incorporated, and that's actually the single best incentive in the country at this point. Illinois has long been a leader in state incentives. They've had a B11 incentive on the book since around 2008 or 9. I can't remember when it originally went into place. It's a 6.25% retailer incentive. So today we're around $1.60 per gallon rack price. Once again, that's 8-9 cents a gallon on every gallon of B11 of state taxes that they don't have to sell. So once again, you could choose to pass some of that cost savings along to your customers in terms of price to make sure that you're competitively priced versus everybody else that's out there, or put some of it in your pocket as margin. And that's typically what we see travel centers do is, utilize some of it as part of their pricing strategy, and then utilize some of it to enhance their margins. But if you look at the math of all of the C-stores and travel centers that are marketing number 2 ULSD in the state of Illinois, it's something like 95% plus of them at this point are marketing B11, taking advantage of this state incentive. I'll skip California a second, go on to Texas. Texas has a 20 cent per gallon retailer incentive for every gallon of B99 that's blended. So at the pump, if you're selling a B20, that's a 4 cent per gallon incentive, which is not insignificant. And then finally, California, with their low carbon fuel standard, and it looks like Oregon is jumping on board with that, and soon to be Washington. You know, there's 70 to 80 to 90 cents a gallon, depending on what the biodiesel is made out of, in terms of cost savings versus number 2 ULSD associated with that. So all of these state incentives are on top of the math I'm going to show you here in a second, which is just the value of RINs. But if you've got a travel center in any of these states and aren't taking advantage of biodiesel, I promise you that a majority of your competitors are. It's a tremendous financial opportunity for travel centers and C-stores marketing diesel fuel. So let me switch and talk about the RIN values. And once again, this is tied to the federal required volume obligation. As David said, you know, RINs are attached to every biodiesel gallon. They're the compliance mechanism that the EPA uses to make sure that Exxon and BP and Shell and Motiva are doing what they can to meet their annual requirements for each of those categories of renewable fuels. With biodiesel, you get 1.5 RINs for each gallon of biodiesel that you purchase. If you choose to purchase it with RINs, as I mentioned already, and you can see in the last bullet point, you can buy biodiesel, neat biodiesel with or without RINs. That's your prerogative as a customer. So RINs today, this was put together a couple days ago. RINs this morning are trading about $1.04, $1.05 per RIN. If you take that times the 1.5, that's $1.55, $1.56 per gallon. So as you can see, that's a huge economic incentive. So here's real math. I put this slide together earlier this week. So when I put this slide together on Monday or Tuesday, NYMEX ULSD heating oil was trading at $1.62 a gallon. So we've got 10 biodiesel plants across the country. When I put this slide together, our average selling price was around 80 over heating oil, FOB, those plants. So you could come to our plant in Houston, Texas, or you could come to our plant in Newton, Iowa, you know, today approximately for about $2.42 a gallon. You can pick up biodiesel from us. If you buy that biodiesel gallon with RINs, it's that 80 over number. You can then go on and sell that RIN, when I did the math, of RINs at $1.50 per gallon. So you're basically, after you sell the RIN, getting biodiesel for 92 cents a gallon. Compare that to, you know, the heating oil price at the rack of $1.62 a gallon. So that's 70 cents a gallon of what we call blending economics available earlier this week. So if you choose to, you know, integrate that as a B10 at the pump, that's 7 gallons of margin, or, you know, that you could turn it back into a price advantage for your customers for you to play with that you can't capture if you're just selling number 2 ULSD. So I talked about the Baka. As I mentioned, it is going to expire likely at the end of 2016. We'll see what the lame duck session of Congress does. We're very confident we'll be reinstated back in 2017. You know, you have the opportunity to buy B99 or B100. The biodiesel suppliers, you know, share this blender's tax credit with all of the participants in supply chain and the value stream. It's, you know, it's an important component of biodiesel being competitively priced with diesel fuel. Just talk about some of the fleet trends that we see. We approach a lot of fleets, as I'm sure you guys do, in terms of you know, trying to get them to adopt biodiesel and biodiesel blends. And I talked about the sustainability trend as well. You know, fleets are continuing to look for efficiencies, you know, wherever they can. Fuel costs is a huge part of their overall operating costs as an industry. They've you know, really warmed up to biodiesel and integrating biodiesel, you know, either in their fleet purchases at travel centers across the country, or actually a number of them, as you guys know, particularly at their home bases, have their own dispensers and tanks, and we're supplying biodiesel directly to a number of those operations at their hubs right now. And in addition, there's, you know, tremendous pressure for fleets to be more sustainable. You know, companies like UPS, Waste Management, FedEx Ground have huge sustainability provisions in terms of driving their companies forward. UPS, FedEx Ground, others have made tremendous investments in alternative fuel vehicles and integrating things like biodiesel, renewable diesel, as well as natural gas and some other things into their fleets. But this continues to be a driver. We see this trend continuing, and once again, a number of fleets that we work with, they're out there actively looking to be able to purchase biodiesel at their travel centers throughout the country. Just one example, a case study I wanted to share with you. So Petroleum Wholesale is an RIG customer down in Texas, have C-stores and travel centers, 40 plus across the country, operating in 9 states, Texas headquarter location. We began working with them in biodiesel in Texas. They were taking advantage of that Texas state incentive initially. Today, they've expanded it beyond Texas because of the blending economics that I just walked you through. Vast majority of the locations offer up to a B20. And some of those southern locations, they offer B20 year-round. And some of their more northern locations, they dial it back in the wintertime. And that's one of the nice things about biodiesel is that, there's great opportunities in the warmer months, and this is what we see a lot of our customers do. If the economics are right, they blend up to B20 in the summertime in the Midwest here, typically April till the end of October, and then they'll turn it down in the wintertime. But, tremendous value proposition there has been since 2013 for Petroleum Wholesale. They've really adopted and really liked what biodiesel has done for them. John Cook is the owner, and you can see his quote there. So just a quick introduction to REG and just a bit more information in terms of the attributes of biodiesel. So we really view it as a drop-in diesel replacement at this point. So historically, almost all biodiesel, dating back to the early 2007, 2008, the early days of biodiesel, was made from primarily soybean oil. The industry has really done a good job of identifying alternative feedstocks to make biodiesel out of. People like REG and others can make exceptional quality biodiesel from things like soybean oil, used cooking oil, animal fats, inedible corn oil as a byproduct of the ethanol production process. And one of the nice things about biodiesel is it eliminates the need for a lubricity additive. If you have B2 blends or higher, it's a tremendous lubricity component of your ULSD fuel stream at that point. Other benefits, and once again, this goes to some of the sustainability provisions, tremendous reductions in particulate emissions, tremendous improvements in terms of greenhouse gas emission scores. So this is really driving the value, in particular with the low carbon fuel standard in California, Oregon, and Washington, and a number of the sustainability companies that we talk to. This is the driver for them as well. So REG is nationwide in scope. We sell biodiesel in every state except for Alaska, market a lot of biodiesel in Canada as well. So this slide, I recognize there's lots of boxes on there. The green boxes represent the 10 biodiesel and renewable diesel plants that we have across the country. The 4 yellow boxes are 4 biodiesel plants that we have under construction. And the blue boxes represent terminals that we're either marketing number 2 ULSD, heating oil in the Northeast, or biodiesel blends across the country. So that, excuse me, so that's one thing I do want to mention. So historically, we only sold neat biodiesel, B99, B100. About 3 years ago, we started making investments in a number of terminals across the country, and now have the opportunity to actually sell straight diesel fuel and biodiesel blends at a number of locations across the country. So if you're interested in talking to us or somebody else about integrating biodiesel in your operation, the best way to maximize your economics is normally to buy neat biodiesel, put it in your own underground B99, B100 tank, have a blending system so you can do B5 to B20 at the pump. If you're not ready to make that type of investment yet, You can buy B5 to B20 at the rack from us and some others as well, which still allows you to take advantage of lots of the blending economics that we've talked to throughout this presentation. So that's the last slide, guys. As Amy said, she's going to post it on the NATSO YouTube site. Actually have folks' email addresses, so we'll send a hard copy out as well with contact details if you want to follow up individually with us and ask us further questions. I'm going to turn it back over to David. We'll open it up for some summary comments from him and then for questions. But thanks for everybody for taking the time to jump on this morning. Go ahead, David.
Oh, you know what? I'm going to scooch in first and to ask this question that we got, which is Ohio eligible for the 3.5-cent retail tax credit?
No, that's an Iowa incentive, Amy.
Okay.
So Ohio used to have a retailer incentive. That expired 3 or 4 years ago. So to my knowledge, there is no state incentive in Ohio at this point.
So thank you for that, John. That was great. That was helpful. I think that as questions kind of come in a little bit, there are a lot of folks who would probably recognize the benefits of biodiesel, but it's a little bit of a daunting task to kind of get from here to there. And I think one of those things that they're going to need to think about as they go through that process is their equipment and their tanks and their blending systems and whatnot. So are you able to talk a little bit about what type of equipment you need, how to go about understanding whether or not the equipment you have right now is sufficient, and what maybe different options might be at your disposal depending on, if you don't have equipment that's necessarily capable of storing and blending biodiesel? Just kind of walk through that process from the perspective of an operator, if you could.
Yeah, great. So great question, David. And this is the type of one-on-one dialogue that we typically want to have with each travel center on their own. So the one thing that I know is that everybody on the line today is selling number 2 ULSD to your customers, and obviously you have tanks associated with that. So everybody on the call today can take delivery of a B2 to a B20 blend if they can find it at their local racks. And as I mentioned at the beginning, biodiesel is much more readily available. There's much more infrastructure out there than there has been in the past. Our company actually now has a division, RIG Energy Services, that focuses on selling B2 to B20. So folks can certainly take advantage of some of the state incentives and some of the RINs values if they know the right questions to ask their supplier, which I've helped tee you up with some of the information to ask those questions to be able to get the economic benefit of the RINs with those biodiesel gallons. Typically, the best opportunity to maximize the value with biodiesel is to put in a dedicated B100 tank above ground or underground, and then what's roughly referred to by the industry as a blending system that basically hooks your underground B100 tank to your diesel tank, goes up to the dispensers, and then allows you basically to determine what blend that you want to sell at what point of the season. So you maybe in the wintertime dial it back to a B5, and in the summertime take advantage of that B20 opportunity. So the typical investment is, you got to break open your cement, which is never cheap, buy the biodiesel tank, buy the blending system, obviously get a contractor to do that work for you. The quotes I've seen on that are typically in the $200,000 to $300,000 range. We don't make specific recommendations to folks who do that work. We are aware of 4 or 5 groups across the country that have done lots of this type of upgrades for travel centers and are happy to put folks in touch with them, David. So we won't make a recommendation. We'll give them a list of 4 or 5 companies and contacts if they want to have the discussions with them, if they've made the decision to put the equipment in. But then at the end of the day, it's all about an economic decision. A lot of it depends how many gallons of diesel fuel you're going through a month. Is there a state incentive in place? What do you think your margin picture is going to look like if you integrate biodiesel? we're happy to sit down with folks and help them with the math on that. Most folks that have put in biodiesel blending systems have seen a very quick payback, typically 2 to 3 years at the longest. So it does make sense in lots of cases to make some of these investments, David.
Got it. And looking at, I would imagine that from the perspective of an independent operator, the notion of getting involved with RINs, which are the commodity that ultimately provides the value for biodiesel, is probably pretty daunting. They don't have, you know, a whole department, a trading department, and whatnot that can really monitor the market and figure out a way to optimize that effectively. So is your recommendation generally that independent operators try and buy RIN lists and simply get the value of the RIN baked into the price that they pay, or are you aware of kind of a mechanism that would enable smaller independent operators to nonetheless play in the RIN market a little bit and try and optimize the economics in that regard?
Yeah, so there's a whole host of options for independents, and I'll tell you, if your volumes are large, maybe you have more than one travel center, if you've got multiple locations, it probably makes more sense to make the investment to take the RINs. You got to get registered with the EPA. There's typically an annual audit associated with that. And then there's a number of groups out there that can help you broker the RINs. And once again, NATSO knows who those organizations are, as well as REG. We can put you in touch with those folks. If you do have, you know, maybe just one location and your volumes are more moderate, the way to go, David, as you suggested, may very well be just to buy RINless. You know, in that case, you're still getting majority of the value from your biodiesel supplier. You need to have a fair feel for what RINs are worth on a daily basis. But there's lots of places you can go to now to get that information to make sure you're not getting taken advantage of by your biodiesel supplier. But that may be the way to go. Once again, that's a discussion, not necessarily a long discussion, but a discussion between, you know, the travel center decision maker internally and then with their biodiesel supplier on what they want to do. But don't let RINs scare you. They're your friend. There's big value associated with them. The important thing is that you recognize what the value is, and they trade on a daily basis. That information is publicly available. That will allow you to negotiate most of the value of RINs going forward.
And I would just emphasize, going forward, you know, NATSO members should be comfortable reaching out to either John at REG or myself to kind of help talk through a lot of this on a more individualized basis. NATSO works with a number of vendors. One of them that comes to mind is an entity called RIN Alliance out of Iowa, which is designed to enable small independent operators that may not have the manpower to really monitor the RIN market and trade RINs to kind of nonetheless take advantage of the economics that can provide. And there are others out there as well. And, you know, could also walk you through what the state incentives are and what other potential value propositions that could help inform whatever decision you might ultimately make. Do we have any more questions, or is that about it? So there's one question that says, what is the cost of B99 RINless today? I'll defer that to you, John. I imagine that'll be market specific, right? But
yeah, so I think the example that I showed, I'll just pull it back up here real quick. So the example that I showed was biodiesel was 92 cents a gallon versus heating oil $1.62, about 70 cents a gallon difference. So if you bought biodiesel RINless from us today with that type of math, we typically sell to you maybe at around 60 under. So there are risks associated with RINs. The prices go up and down every day. Typically, they're sold in increments of 100,000, so you need to accumulate some of them and hold on to them. And there's obviously the administrative cost. So once again, that's the reason that you need to understand what RINs are worth on a daily basis. to capture as much of that value as you can. We would keep some of that because of the risk associated with holding on to them and the administrative fee. But you can see in this example, you know, if you could buy B99 RINless at 60 cents under FOB or plant, 5 or 10 cents to get it, you know, in your tank at your facility, still a tremendous blending opportunity there.
So I think that's all the questions we have. If there's nothing else you wanted to chat about, John, I think we can give people 15 minutes of their time back. And Amy, is there anything else?
Oh, just what's your number, John, in case people want to call you?
Yeah, so I'll attach my my contact details, cell phone and email with the deck when we send it out, Amy. Okay. But I'm giving her the phone here as well. It's 515-509-1259. But Amy sent us the email addresses, so we'll zap the deck out with contact details to everybody as well.
Great.
Okay. Thanks everybody for your time. Certainly appreciate it. Thanks to Dave and Amy and NATSO for allowing us to jump on here.
Thank you, John. Really appreciate it.
Bye, guys.
See you, everybody.